Hello, everybody. Welcome to the presentation on communication. This is a topic that's pretty crucial to group runs, so really excited to get this one out now. We're gonna go through the agenda real quick. There is going. Okay, I don't know why it does that. We're gonna have a couple of question sections, just like yesterday. We don't have school of organization on this agenda, but that's what it is. First half, we're gonna cover some of the important topics on just why we do communication, some glossary and terms, really hammer home some of the ideas on this, some examples of good communication, and how we talk before runs. And then the second half is going to really focus in on colors and then communicating needs and fixing things. There will be sections for questions and intermissions. Sweet. Thank you, Dern, for posting agenda in the chat. Feel free to ask questions during either the question sections. Prefer, again, just like yesterday, if it's going to be answered in section 2, to wait until questions 2 to ask the question. So let's get right into it. Why is communication important in a run? I'm pressing forward. I don't know if what I'm sharing flickers back and forth, but I don't know why it does that from my end. Anyways, effective communication reduces total comm usage because you're spending less time comming pieces of information. You have an easier time hearing objective calls because objective calls are clear comms, like everything that they're saying is quick and concise, as well as the other statements made are clear and concise, and so easier time hearing objectives, easier time focusing on the run as there is less comms clutter, improves character power through gear strength when you communicate needs and effectively work to fix those, and makes messing up the flow of the run harder because you have information on what's going on. So communication is very important throughout a run. Why we have leaders in charge of runs. SPL touched on this a bit yesterday, but we have generally either rotating runners, rotating leaders who are people not running during a run, or people who are dedicated to leading a run. And I have a picture of Act 2 here. This is one of the examples of why we have leaders in a run. There are a lot of objectives to accomplish here. Like SPL talked about, the minimum ones to push forward for urgency are Fidelitas/Trial, Weaver, and Oak, but also Caitlin needs to get done, Alir needs to get done, and in different player counts, you do them in different ways. And a leader's job is to effectively communicate job responsibilities to members of the team such that they can actually efficiently do their objectives in a timely manner and assign tasks effectively. So we have leaders because it improves communication, because instead of like having a bunch of comms dedicated to people trying to figure out what tasks are available and what tasks need to get done, one person keeps the flow of the run in mind and assigns tasks based off of relevant levels, which makes it easy for the entire group to do what they need to do. So that is one of the main reasons we have leaders in charge of runs. There might be others. SPL in chat might mention some, or some people might talk about other reasons if they have any questions on that. Continuing on, glossary and terms. We talked a bit about swirl. really just want to hammer in how we communicate things. Swirl should only be used as a actually click the button to swirl to that the person. So swirl Krazzed is swirl to me. Swirl SPL is swirl to SPL. And generally, this needs to be communicated as such. Ability player name is shorthand for do you have the ability, quest state wise, to swirl to player name. I know personally SPL was talking about it yesterday as do you have ability to swirl to main runner, but I like to do ability player name because there are specific quest states, for example in Act 9 for Oasis, where knowing if everybody's finished the Stormblade into the bottle into opening the Oasis is a side content objective that needs to be known if you've done that. So if you say ability player name, you clarify that do you have the ability to swirl to said player without having to say swirl. And it's very important within a run that when a question is asked, such as ability, that there is an answer from players. Confirm is yes. Confirm, we choose confirm specifically because there is less confusion around yeah and nah and some phrasings that when said quickly or mumbled into a mic can be a bit confusing. There's opportunities for confusion. We've had it in the past. Confirm, there is zero ambiguity. And no, I don't, or no is pretty clear what it is. I have labeled 3R1G. It's a way of notating link colors. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get to communicating links colors and needs, but just want to bring it up now. And then up, there is a bit of context between the direction and portaling, but generally we use up for specific situations in which we want to notate for one player or for the group and don't want to say swirl. The example I'm thinking of is in Act 5, the main runner swirls in specifically one player for waypoint and can say 3, 2, 1 up on waypoint, and then the person who swirls into waypoint to run side content runs and puts a portal by door or by the rooftop for the player running the banner to take, and can say up when that portal is up. And that way the team does not hear swirl. Again, swirl's a trigger word for players. Everybody should be swirling when they hear swirl. And so using other words such as up can to let people know that their individual swirl is ready can be pretty helpful. It's pretty quick to say, and with understanding of flow of the run, it's the context between them is usually clear. Generally times where they're talking direction, it should be zones that you're already all together in, like wetlands, and you're saying the direction is up. But I feel like there's better ways of communicating that information too. Yeah, clock system is my personal preference for indicating direction. 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock. It doesn't get confused because people orient maps differently in their head. I see a question in chat. Do you just say up, going up, or lab up? It really depends. Personally, I I'm at a point in runs where most people in focus know my name, like know my voice, so I can just say up. However, as a good practice, it should be your name up for runs within these boot camp, as people are unfamiliar with names or like with voices. It's going to be an extra word, but it's going to provide clarity. So I would say, generally speaking, yeah, if you need, also like what SPL said, if you need somebody to come to you, say their name and up. That way it triggers them to like think about it. Yep, SPL's raising some good points. I think that's a good cover of our basic glossary that we have here. Let's move on. Some examples of good communications. How to communicate these items to the right. This is going to get hammered out more in the sections for communicating items. But, for example, these gloves have 2 blue sockets, 1 green socket, 1 red. Even with the method I had notated on the glossary, it's really a lot of information to say 2B, 1R, 1G. That amount of information often is confusing or a bunch of extra mental burden to figure out what it actually is to another player when it's 3 colors. And so a good rework of it is chrome extra green, or like extra blue. So, yeah. Crema gloves is basically what they are, but you would say chrome extra blue, and that gives context on the colors. The way I would communicate a question, chrome plus blue is fine too. The way I would communicate a 3-link with an extra socket, because there can be some confusion between chrome extra blue being a 4-link versus a 3-link with an extra socket, is if it is a 3-link explicitly stated as so, and then treat any time they say chrome extra blue as a 4-link. Does that make sense? So like 3-link triple blue extra green is how I would communicate a 3-link. That's 3 blue linked and then 1 extra green. We want to provide distinction there while still maintaining generally a minimum amount of commas. This bow has triple flat and then open suffix. And that's probably how I would communicate it. I don't want to tell the team the ranges. I would also potentially say nutty bow. Yeah, Giga Lightning is also fine. But the general idea is they don't need to know it's 4 to 6 fire, 26 to 44 cold, and then like a Giga Lightning roll. It's just either triple flat Giga Lightning open suff or Giga Bow crazy bow, something like that. And that is the importance for how you communicate an item. Is we want to minimize the amount they have to think about it. At least in the communication, we want to minimize the time it's taking up in vocal space, and we want to still effectively communicate things they need to know about it for their decision making. So, like, generally, as a rule of thumb, I trust bow players to figure out their bow situation, and I try and give them the very minimum information they need to make a decision. For example, triple flat, Giga Lightning, opens off. That should put them in a position to make a decision on it, especially when they actually see the item and can evaluate it in their inventory. But letting them know that it exists is a big first step. Other good examples of communication is communicating objectives. For example, SPO brought up trial up. This is a good piece of information to provide to the team, especially early game, first act, when you're going to need one specific person to swirl to you, to maybe potentially trade you transmutes so you can get team faster attacks. Saying trial up, like single name come or something, is going to be an efficient way of communicating that the specific state you have. It's 4 words. It's going to get the thing across. So trial up, SPL come is going to specifically get what we need across for there. Other than that, communicating where you are on bosses is really good. For example, starting first innocence phase, minion phase. Starting true innocence, first minion phase. Starting true innocence, second minion phase. Get to your blue packs. I would just say gun wants. Answering the question in chat. Early is like, I would even accept I need, and then you sort it out when it's being dropped, like guns grabbing that. Generally, I would want it planned out a bit in advance, which is why going once earlier is going to be better, because it's going to mean that other people don't yoink your items, which is a kind of annoying thing that can happen. And if it's communicated that somebody wants, don't yoink the item, please. Yeah. It's... sorry, I went back and jumped on that. Yeah, on bossing, like, make sure you're communicating states. It's helpful for the team for understanding where you are as a pusher or as a side content individual if you're doing side content bosses like in Act 6. It's really kind of crucial that, like, this information is being effectively presented to the team and to the leader of the run so they can have a clear state of flow of the run and to know what's ready. So, like, saying Aberrath up when Aberrath's up, and when, like, first of the 3 hearts is down on the Rizlatha. Like, making that I'm entering Rizlatha boss room so that person who's pushing Southern Forest knows if they need to speed up or not. Like, this kind of information, when you're communicating objectives, provides a lot of context for other players to make decisions in a time frame that, like, provides a lot of benefit, and it doesn't take much comms, and it's important comms to have that is, like, basically higher priority than every other thing, because some item is not going to be more important to the run than knowing that quest state. If somebody's talking about items, talk over them or let them know that you need space to talk. Say I have objective information, and then say what you have. It's more important than anything they're talking about. 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, communicating ability. This is also something that's really important, especially when you get a better understanding of flow of the run. Like, making sure this information is communicated. So, apex checks, ability swirl the main runner, abilities like ability SPL, for example, if SPL was running Oasis, or ability, like, wherever. Anytime, it should mainly be brought up from leader, but can be brought up really by anybody. Anytime there's a quest state where it really requires, like, where there is a quest state blocker and they are the main runner is ahead, or the side runner is ahead of that quest state blocker, communicating ability within the team is pretty vital. It really gives a sense of where people are at and what they've accomplished. So it's a good reminder for people who don't have it. You can work to solve quest state, but really need to communicate this. Really want to hammer on that. So if your leader says ability SPL, I need to confirm from every member. Like, go and confirm. Krazzed confirm. Going down the list, and every person needs to answer. Or Krazzed no. And then we can, if the leader wants to know why, either they can figure that out themselves, or they can ask, and if I know, I can give that answer. But the big thing is making it clear to the team. So that's an example of communicating ability efficiently. Would be like the people going through the list of the team and saying if they have ability. Okay. Last big thing, informing a group of build selection before a run. We've been doing this in the run organization and in the threads already, and that's really good to see. It's generally, if you're not setting up like a thread for this in like a run before BPL or a run before league start, it is still crucial that you're informing your team of build selection that you're playing, and any power spikes and power troughs that you are aware of that can be important for leading the run or for players' mental map the run. For example, I'm playing Champion Aura bot. I don't need any gems throughout the run. I'm going to be power spiking through Act 4, and then after Act 4, I'm going to slowly power trough. Don't expect any running post Act 6, or like Act 5. Is like maybe how I would communicate that information. Or I'm playing, I'm a Krima Templar. I'm going to need a faster attacks at level 8, and I should be good gems other than that. I'm power spiking really hard post 24 crafts, and especially hard at 28 when I get access to my things and have them socketed. Please, like, plan around that. Those are examples of communication. It helps team be aware of what types of weapons they need to be looking for. If informed early enough and you're doing your own filters, you can tighten and loosen specific sections of the filter based off of who you have and what types of items you're looking for. If you're just using SPL, it helps mentally filter items. If I know I don't have any, if I know we don't have any bow characters and it's just one claws player, I stop looking at bows and quivers, and I only look at like good claws and good daggers. So making sure that you're informing your team of the overall comp is very important, and so it's been really nice to see that in our organization so far. Keep that up. And it doesn't have to be something long. This really also, like, the build power spikes and troughs, when you understand them, is pretty important, because it also helps, like, determine Act 2 runners, for example. For example, Marauder is very weak early game and doesn't have access to a good movement skill, so the expectation is they shouldn't be running stuff much for Act 1, and it also means that in Act 2, they've generally, like, struggled on XP, and you would rather have them on, like, a side content piece as much as possible, and then they really spike hard at 16, where they get access to Blood Rage and double Aura, and then they have, like, power enough to get to 28, and you can have them run, like, sections from, like, post Northern Forest to early Act 3, and then they look to really get power in docks to 28, and then can help in Act 4, but don't do much in Act 3. Like, that kind of knowledge on what Marauder does isn't pretty important for how the team runs things, because they're not going to expect much in Act 1, early Act 2, and late Act 3. Okay, we hammered through some of that pretty quickly. I know there's a lot. If there's any questions, feel free to post them in chat beyond the ones that I've already answered, or raise your hand and we can get you up on the stage to ask it in voice. Ability is generally not used like as a actual swirl situation, but as a quest state denotion before chains or things need to happen. So I'm going to use the Act 9 one, for example, Oasis. Generally, this is set up as this piece of side content. And the way it works is main runner drops a portal somewhat near the item if they see it. If they don't see it, they just grab waypoints on their way towards foothills and ask player 1 to swirl in. So it's going to be main runner, player 1, player 2 is how I'm going to denote this. Player 1 swirls in, runs the objective, places a portal on the item. Everybody should be out of lab and in Act 9, and that player 1 places a portal on the item before running towards the door. They call player 2 in to replace their portal on the item, the Stormblade, and then they replace their own portal back next to the door. So then they have the current portals are player 2 on item, player 1 on Oasis door. You can then have the entire team, other than the main runner, do that at their own time, basically all the way up until when main runner has finished refinery boss, but before player 1, who has to do their own chain, has opened door, or like is finished with the Shikari fight. So there's a period of time there where they're like running Oasis and fighting the boss, where it's very crucial that the runner both the person in Shikari knows if they have if they can replace their own portal in the boss room, or if if they need to leave their portal up, or how slowly they need to take it, or if they need to stall, or how we're fixing it. So for example, a situation might arise where the main runner hasn't taken it and 2 other players just we're doing lab trial and then doing whatnot, or doing Boiling Lake and haven't done it yet. Leader of the run says ability player 1, and those 3 players say no. Knowing that, if you have extra portals, you can look to have, for example, the leader hasn't placed a portal yet. The leader can go in to player 1 portal and replace it, giving player 1, if they're already boss ready, the ability to portal out and go do other things. But generally speaking, that's an objective we want to have everybody get ready for in terms of the run. So asking ability early and often for that objective to make sure that people are doing it, have grabbed the blade, done the 3A talks, and then taken the portal by door to open it up. It's pretty important. And then main runner kills refinery, tell them to do that, they need to inform ability, like confirm, I'm ready to swirl to that player without saying swirl, obviously. So generally, long story short, ability is specifically used pre-situations where there could be like quest state missed, and isn't an actual like swirl situation, because that's actually called with just swirl. Like player 1, when everybody has confirmed they have ability, can portal inside the boss room or just have people swirl on the door. I think you have to. I don't know if the second door in Shikari is a checkpoint for that. I would just place a portal in the boss room generally. You don't die in that fight. But that is actually called with a swirl itself. Or ups, like going up, SPL come would be one, but like ability itself is confirming, can you do that? Great question. That was not covered in, I don't think that's covered in part 2. I think in most situations it's fine to just say, hey, something came up, I need to take 5 to 10 or drop. People are understanding or should be understanding. Obviously, PoE is a game. It's not as like critical as an IRL issue, and just saying like, hey, something came up, IRL, I need to take 5, is not an issue within runs. And then as well in advance, if you know hey, I'm waiting on this call, I might need to take that during the run, can also be said in advance if you know that in advance of the run. Things like this can be done, but generally speaking, people should be pretty understanding if you just say something came up. Okay, that's not great that I've made somebody confused with it. Let's see if we can resolve that. What part of it? I guess that's a hard question. What is confusing about it? I don't know if I have any good examples other than like specific quest states where you'd say ability. Act 4, a good example is Malachi. You need to talk to Piety first. The main runner is in Malachi doing Malachi. And you want to know, do people have the ability to swirl to the person doing Malachi? Do they have the ability to get to the main runner? And if the answer is no, it's ability main runner name. If people answer no, they need to go talk to Piety. And basically, that's how it's used. Is like, it's a confirmation before we would get there, and then player who, like, main runner name says swirl main player name when the actual swirl's going off.
I'll just jump in here. So there's a couple of reasons why we do this. It's one, to ensure everyone has appropriate quest progression to complete the objective that's currently being pushed for. And the second is to inform the runner if they need to portal out of that objective, if they can even put a portal down because their portal might be on the previous quest state thing. So, for example, it's very common in Act 9 that you'll have a portal outside the Oasis door as the person who's pushing for Scorpion, and you're inside the fight, and you need to know, has everyone taken my portal so I can put down another portal out, and then I can go back to farming while we wait for the chain to be ready. The other option is in Act 4, some people are not quite out of lab yet. So if someone's replaced your portal on Piety, then you can portal inside Malachi, and instead of just running around the zone for like 20 seconds or 50 seconds or however long it takes the last person who's in lab to be finished, you can now leave and go to do something else, right? So I think that's maybe the missing piece, is why do we ask for ability? It's to inform the person who's running of the timing of other players and what they need to do next. It's to make sure that everyone has the appropriate quest state that they need to get the objective that's being set up. And then, as Krazzed said before, it's about making sure that we communicate in such a way that it doesn't trigger a swirl action. Does that help?
For the question I'm seeing in chat, I think the best way I would suggest is the helper request feedback, just a VOD review request with the link to the resource. I believe Malik has one, a thread that was chatted in 1 hour ago. It was made yesterday at sometime, I want to say a little bit past midnight EU time, like decent time NA. Correct. Good. All right. If there's no other questions that people, I haven't seen any raised hands, and I haven't seen any other questions in chat. If there's no questions in the next minute or so, I think we'll go to intermission. 5-minute break is what I had planned. Just stand up, stretch, grab what you need. So, down for 5-minute break. Reconvene in 5. Uh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, it's been 5 minutes more or less. I'm ready to go again. Let's go. So we're getting into part 2 of the presentation. Communicating fixes, communicating item needs. Let's get started. We're gonna use the same 3 images because I was too lazy to get other ones. This is just going to be basically as much item information as I can provide. We already talked a bit in the good communication about how I would communicate a Chrome Extra versus like a 3-link version of it or versus that. Generally, as a rule of thumb, like the gloves, I'm saying 3R1G gloves. I try and leave off slot until asked for, as the colors are the pretty critical spot. If somebody wants to know that, they can ask slot, and then I can tell you, like, helmet, gloves, boots, chest. And then if they want more information, generally the other piece of information that might be asked for is type. And I try and leave that question reserved specifically for, like, stat requirements. So, like, armor evasion. Generally, so one that might come up is you drop a piece of gear that has no strength, dex, or int requirements. So this item, if chromed, has equal likelihood of any color that needs to be communicated. I would either say, like, somebody has type either empty or no stats. That's going to try and communicate to them that it has equal likelihood. That's something people need to be aware of. But generally, for like the gloves, I would say strength dex or armor evasion. When asked type, and when asked like slot, I would be saying gloves. How you communicate it is pretty important, especially early in the run, like SPL noted. I would say in Act 3 and 4, slot is less important because basically you're just trying to get 4 links and you'll work the rest of your gear around them. However, later in Acts, let's say Act 6, you've already got some of your gear established. You're looking for pieces of gear that'll upgrade your res. So they might say dual res life, 4-link gloves. Might be like a normal call, but I would say like 3R1G, dual res life, and then they can ask slot, and I can say gloves, and either they can work that into their build, or they can make informed decisions around that. Especially like in X6, where if they had a 4-link that they need there, either this is a good spot to put it in, or if it's not, they can either think about how they want to work around their gems to fit the new information they have. Maybe getting a 3R1G pair of gloves allows them to work in a pair of boots that they couldn't previously fit, that has like higher movement speed, but they couldn't put it on because they were like needed to the slots. And so communicating these things are important, but I would not add that information unless people explicitly ask for it, because I feel like that's the most often missed. So people will say 3 red, 1 green gloves, Uh, and my first thought is when I hear the colors is how do I like what do these color groups do for me? And oftentimes I miss the clarification on gloves and have to ask for it anyways. So I don't provide it unless it's explicitly desired from the player because they need mental headspace to figure out what they're doing with socket colors. Linking it in chat can be nice. However, I tend to find that if you're opening chat, you're losing time efficiency wise. It's an extra open chat, like while you have your inventory open and a Control-Alt click. That is not like in a spot where that I normally would want to be having my cursor. Are you linking it off the ground? Yeah, Control. Okay. I mean, in that case, that's a nice to do. I don't think it's super necessary, but it's something that will help others. That I think covers links. Obviously 2 of each. I say just the colors the same way I would with 3 red, 1 blue, 1 green, or 4 red. So 4R, 4 red, 3 red, 1 green, 2 red, 2 green. But I think explicitly when we get into all the color situations, I really like Chrome Extra because it is the least mental headspace for me compared to trying to figure out with 3 listed colors the configuration. I think that covers everything I wanted to do. For colors, items I tend to link more often than colors because colors I feel like can be pretty easily communicated. Some things I just don't want to figure out how to communicate with an item because cluttering comms is an issue. Like this bow is pretty clear, but there's some items where it's like there's nuance to it where I might not potentially care to figure out how good it is for them, and I might say, SPL, figure out this item if it fits in your build. Or here's a ring, y'all figure out if this ring works for you. Generally, I do that for items that I find, for example, like in lab, where I have extra downtime that can afford to take the time, but if I'm pushing, it's not getting linked in chat ever. I feel like pushing, I need to be 100% focused on pushing the pace of the run, and I feel like linking things while pushing is just terrible banned. But if I'm farming, if I have the extra time, I can do so, but I'm also not linking to the person pushing because I want them focused on pushing the pace of the run. I'm linking to other people farming or just dropping it on objective and saying figure it out. I think that let's talk about some of the other types of items. Generally, when communicating boots, this is going to tie pretty heavily into a presentation I believe Brooks is doing later on what is a good item. First things first for communicating an item is figuring out if your item is actually good. There's going to be a bit more on that, but for now I'm just going to shoot off some examples that are good. Dual res movement speed boots. life, movement speed, boots with an extra open suffix. Like gloves with attack speed, for example, open suffix. Generally, things I want to be communicating on an item is what makes you want to equip the item in as short as possible. That's grouping res and suffixes, like open suffix, and then any other important stats. Attack speed is generally one that attack speed, movement speed, life are generally ones that I try and pop out. Res, I try and just tell you how many types of res it has, not how much, doesn't matter, and not like what types they are, doesn't matter. People can solve around that when they have the item. You leave that mental headspace to whoever's putting it on. Your goal is communicate effectively to the team. I have a item that somebody should be putting on, and that's can be said something along the lines of, I know SPL is used before. I have an item, somebody needs to put this on. And that effectively communicates to the group, this item is nuts, and somebody's putting it on. And then you can provide the information about it. Dual res, high life, belt. That information is going to be pretty huge for understanding. And another thing with this is filtering who you're talking to can be a big thing. For example, double flat rings. I might specifically single out the players who are playing this, like my attack builds. Like if I only have one bow player in the run, I'm explicitly talking to a person. Like Gone, I have double flat ring. Do you want? And providing that kind of information, like who I'm presenting the information to is also pretty important. So like if you are aware of who is in your run and who might want an item, how you communicate it might change. Belt wed. Heavy belt wed is like something I might say to a Venom Gyre player who needs a heavy belt. And wed is a insane stat for them, and I can basically already hear SPL saying gimme on that item. And like just communicating that heavy belt wed will probably get a pickup unless they have an insane item. And generally I would say, like we talked about earlier a bit with what Gon said, Gon once or pass, and every player individually can say pass. Like gun pass. Everybody can. I guess I'll provide a clarification. Generally, I try and only say pass when it's an item that would normally be for my build. If I'm playing Marauder and somebody says 4 red in like Act 5, I feel as the Marauder player and the person who it would use 4 red, it's my responsibility to say pass. And I don't feel as worried about if a Templar is saying pass, because it's not something they would ever really need. And so that's an understanding of your build and the builds of your teammates and communicating effectively for that. So like when I'm linking an item, I need to know who wants to use it as well as who I'm expecting a response from when I say it, like if they want the item. So if I'm linking a bow, or if I'm talking about a bow, I'm specifically talking to my bow players, and I expect only passes from them. And if I hear passes from them, I'm dropping the item. I think that covered most of how I would communicate. I guess like movement speed, double res, movement speed, life. I try and use high in later acts when it's explicitly like a really high stat. for example, like 70 life ring, I use high life to indicate that the life roll is better. I'm not giving them a range. I'm not giving them a tier. I'm just giving them high life, and it tends to be like upper 1 or 2 tiers available at the time. 40 plus, SPL says in chat. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Like, it helps communicate, like, for example, with the bow, we could say high lightning damage. How we communicate this is pretty important to an individual who has a good item already but wants a better one. As knowing what stats are high can help them make a decision. If it's like, if I just say life and it's like 30 life, that might not beat out their current item. But if I say high life double res, it's basically always beating out their current item. And like, they can know that and make plans around that. Yeah. It's really tied into a lot of what that Brooks presentation on what is a good item is going to be. So there will be that workshop coming up at some point. I don't know the exact dates and announcements, but that should help a lot with how you communicate items. So keep that in mind when you're watching that one. Okay, Friday evening EU time. I think that really helps with how you communicate items. So I think that's all I want to cover on this. Initially, we can ask any questions later. I want to move on. Communicating needs. We talked a bit about this during yesterday's presentation, but we're going to go a bit more in depth here. Like, I have a couple of these, and the needs are not how I would communicate it, but like the general requirement. And then I have a dash and like how I would personally communicate the information. Let's say you're in Act 1 or 2. This is generally something that comes up in those kind of acts. I have no item in my glove slot, and I need green sockets for, let's say, like, Blood Rage in Act 2. And one other thing. And I have nothing in that slot. I might be planning this out in late Act 1. Or extremely early Act 2 before I would actually have access to it. And my communication would be, any glove needs 2 green sockets. That, by any gloves, I mean I don't need specifically rare. I tend to signify like color need, or like rarity needs, or needs for it to be a stronger powered item before I cover sockets. So any gloves is signifying that I'll take any rarity, or just any gloves, period. Gloves needs 2 green is signifying that I need 2 green on it. I'm trying to explicitly get across just that I need gloves. I don't need to say that I have an empty socket, but saying I'll take any gloves, 2 green. I need gloves that do something. That's a way of saying I'll take any rare gloves. And like that information is really important for your build power. Like you have a white pair of gloves on in Act 6. This is pretty unacceptable. Say I need rare gloves. This is like, I'll take any. I don't need any socket requirements, just any rare gloves. That's a pretty important upgrade, both like somewhat in Acts 3 through 5, but I would say more so Acts 6 through 10, where power, you have more resources to put power onto items. Like, this is where you can be looking only explicitly for picking up certain rares for different people's needs. You don't need as much transmute requirements. You still should be picking up items, but generally looking to only pick up items that people would equip. So knowing that somebody needs rare gloves means I'm going to actively filter for gloves. And that's noted in the fix. For any gloves needs 2 greens. They're looking for any pair of gloves. Basically, just there was a run that I saw that I was watching with Jaren and SPL where SPL didn't have a pair of gloves, needed greens, and ended up swapping gloves over to Jaren, who had was fine, just needed a blue, and got a pair of blue-red gloves in return from SPL. And they swapped gloves because SPL needed the 2 greens in it, and Jaren just needed the blue. And so there's different fixes. If they just know any gloves, 2 green sockets, you can check vendors, you can watch for glove drops, especially rares. If I'm saying I need any rare gloves, I'm looking for every pair of rare gloves, and I'm also looking for do I have essences in my inventory that can make better than any pair of rare gloves and instead make a dual res life pair of gloves. Missing 4 links. This is how I would personally communicate that is need Crema colors anywhere but chest. This is explicitly because I would be playing, already communicated I'm playing Armor Crema. This ties into communication before the run. And if people have an understanding of what my build requires, which is either 3 blue, 1 red, or 4 blue for Arma brands, generally 4 blue preferred, but 3 blue, 1 red acceptable. And then Crema is a wide range of color requirement, possibilities. Instead of listing off all the possibilities, I'm just saying Crema colors with the hope that the players in my team who I've been working with for a while will understand what I'm requiring. And if they don't understand that should be a pre-conversation. Here are my 4 link colors and the combinations that are possible. And getting an understanding of that before the run is going to help all the players filter items, both in making the filter and mentally filtering items to pick up, and items that work. So when I'm saying Crema colors anywhere but chest, I'm saying chest already has something I'm locked in on my chest. I can't do any messing around with that. That's probably my 4 blue. Crema colors though I'd still need, and it can go in any slot. The way you communicate that might be a bit different if you only need 1 4 link, need my 4 link, need 4 green. And that might be, I'll take 4 green any slot. Or maybe you have dual res attack speed gloves and you say, I'm not replacing those, so it's 4 green anywhere but gloves. But even then, I think probably 4 link is better than that pair of gloves, because you can still binding or do other things to make it rare and have a stronger overall item. That's, I think, for the most part. 4 links, I have some fixes denoted for that. Binding orbs, chromes, drops, etc. Binding orbs is a big one. Having knowledge of what your team has. And if, binding orbs, they start dropping out around 25, 26. They're going to be kind of huge, I would say, through Acts 6 or 7 for making items that are good. Acts 3 and 4, I would say they're pretty much explicitly used for making items, actually making 4 links on bases that are actively good with 3 to 4 sockets that I would actually want as my main 4 links. I would say probably around Act 5 when everybody has everything, hopefully. It's starting to be used to make auxiliary pieces and making things rare. for example, I just want 4 sockets on my. I have like a white pair of gloves, and I just want a rare pair of gloves with 4 sockets. I've already got helm and chest as my 4 links. I might binding a pair of gloves if we don't have an explicit need for it elsewhere. But like communicating missing 4 links, binding orbs are huge. Chromes can be used on certain bases, and that's like a communication on base type that happens after like slot and stuff. So we go, I have a 4 link. Colors aren't great for you, but you're still missing 4 link, and it sounds somewhat acceptable. Like, for example, I say 3 red or 3 blue, 1 green, and I need my Arma chest still, or my Arma piece, and it's preference of 3 blue, 1 red, or 4 blue, not the 1 green. So you ask type, and they go pure int. Maybe you chrome that because it has a pretty high likelihood of going 4 blue or 3 blue, 1 red. And you can communicate that too. Like, can you chrome it, or do people have chromes to drop on next boss for that item? Want it for my 4 link. Build feeling weak due to white gear. I might say I have 2 white 4 links. Anybody have fix? The idea for this is elks past the point of gem usage, or any essences people have, or keeping an eye out for essences. Extra bindings, like I mentioned previously, past the point of 4 links. If you apply a binding to your already 4-linked item, it doesn't change that 4 link. It just makes it rare, so it's like an extra elk in that sense. Any other fixes, like, or, for example, SPL had mentioned gloves already, like, or any slot that is just a white item or a basic item with like just a craft. You can be explicitly clear saying, need any X item that does anything, or like rare. This is going to give you more character power because you've identified a weak piece of gear and have asked for a team fix, basically. 1 second. Throat. All right. Sorry about that. So keeping in mind, your team can fix these things, and like having white pieces of gear, especially post Act 5, is like turbo banned. Having crafted items is still really weak, and unless like you have an explicit reason why you can't have better, which I'm hard pressed to believe. Like, maybe it's a specific color combination of like 4 sockets, very specific colors that is hard to replace for like different items you require, but basically everything is fixable by communicating needs, and if you don't communicate, it's going to be way harder to fix it than if you communicate. Currency for weapon crafts of any kind. This is things like whetstones for attack builds, or transmutes for any of your 24 crafts or 28 crafts. Alterations. Just having currency for these things is pretty important. For an attack build, that might look like I need whetstones from my Gilded Axe craft, or I need 4 transmutes or whatever. Maybe for an attack-based build, you say, I'm fine with an essence for weapon crafting. Like, I'm on an Act 3 bow. Any essence with a bow is like from Act 6 is just going to be better. Communicating that kind of information can be huge. So just like I need a better weapon. Here's what I need for it. Or the types of things I need for it. I think that covers this. We can answer questions at the end. Actually, there is one clarification I want to provide here. I know I got this question before. I don't think I have a section for it, and this is as good of a time as any. So I asked a question yesterday. How do you balance this kind of communication for communicating needs and items with, like, communication for objectives? And the basic answer is communication for objectives takes precedence at all times. If somebody needs to say that you need to swirl to them, they need the space to do so, and they can either talk over you or say, I need this, like, I have something I need to say. Generally, if it's a swirl now kind of issue, that's just a talk over. But if it's like innocence first phase, that's a objectives come, clear comms please, and then you go and say that. But basically, anytime a leader isn't communicating new information to the team about where people are going, or there isn't objectives being called, and this is a flow of the run thing, basically anytime that there is not an explicit actual call happening, or a leader call, like for next objectives, is a good time to communicate needs. Communicate needs often, and, like, to the point of persistence. Like, if you are missing a 4-link or a 3-link, or you need gloves with stats and you haven't got them, anytime you can communicate that without, like, basically repeating it on loop, like, constantly, is a good time to communicate it. And that's a flow of the run thing where it's like, I need to be aware of when a call might be likely from a teammate and spend less time calming then, or if they start talking, shut up and let them get their information out. So if Sleepy's pushing innocence, and I know he's on innocence, and Sleepy starts calming, I need to shut up and let Sleepy get his calm out. But basically any other time is a good time to communicate needs. Like, I need that 4-link and I need it bad. It's build critical, or I need the build power from having a better item. I want that pretty badly. Any time is a good time as long as it's not interrupting, like, actual progression. Communicating how to fix a problem. Here are some of the ones, like some of the more common ones that I've seen. This isn't a comprehensive list of things, but basically each one is noted as fixable because everything in the run is fixable with communication and like good teamwork. For example, let's say you didn't do your first lab window because you were too low on XP, and then you're the only one on XP to do second half of Act 4. Any of the people in lab didn't get the sufficient XP, and instead of slowing down the run, you were forced to push the second half of Act 4. And because in order for any of the people who had done first lab, who are behind on XP, to push, they need the XP in order to not brick themselves. They would have to farm and then push, and that's slowing down progression. We don't want to do that. So let's say you weren't able to do either lab window because you're forced to push second half of Act 4 because nobody's on XP. This is fixable. There is ways to set up your quest chaining in Act 5 such that you can do your lab while people are pushing Act 5 and then just take like 5 or 6 portals in Act 5 and get all of your quest state. It would be one at Ascent, one at the boss in Slave Pens, one at the dude with eyes, preferably also one at the skill point item, if possible, as well as one at door from main runner. And that fix gets you all quest state in Act 5. And the expectation is if you're messed up in this window and you don't get you don't have the ability to go farm an Act 4 zone, like Calm Stronghold or push through Ascent and Slave Pens, you're going to be rotated basically to farming duty for a while. So as long as you have quest state, you're good. This is fixable. That's communicating a problem. I didn't get either lab window. I'm pushing second half of Act 4, and the leader comes who's setting up what portals for the Act 5 chain, such that you can get all the quest state you need. That's a fix. Communicating that is important and easy. Or relatively easy. Don't have the Apex for Vol Oversoul and miss quest state in Act 2. You didn't say ability, we didn't have clear comms, and you missed the Apex check. You don't have Apex, everybody else has quest state, you don't. How do we fix? Saying missed oversold, don't have quest state, is going to be way more helpful than saying I'm out of the run. I'm out of the run is not a fixable issue. Communicating what happened or what you don't have ability to, what you can't do, is going to be way better. It's a pet peeve of mine when somebody says I'm out of the run for something like this, because there is a fix for everything. And I can't solve I'm out of the run, but I can solve any issue you present to me within the run. And so as a leader, I want to know the quest state of ability of the team members. And if you just say I missed quest state, I can fix that. And that might look like switching who's main running early Act 3, having the person give you waypoint in caverns, and then making sure that you create a new on your way to Oversoul, or having them rerun it for you if you're not on XP, or there's many different fixes for this, but I need to know missed Apex, don't have quest state, can't progress to Act 3. That allows the leader of the run to provide a clear fix. Okay, this person, you're putting a portal on a Clarissa that's finished. This person, you're giving Caverns waypoint. We're switching this person to main running. And that is an easy fix to implement as a leader, and just providing that information is kind of huge. Missing trials is fixable. If you explicitly say which trials they are, or where they're on the board, that's pretty easily fixable. Generally, this requires the person who was in the zone. For example, the one that's missed most often is the one in Marketplace, the Marketplace trial. This is fixable generally by two people, the main runner and by the person who actually ran it themselves. And the leader can figure out who is in a spot where they can actually help you out of those two to get access to that. These things are fixable, but you need to communicate clearly which one you missed, and we can work on who has the necessary states to get you this thing, or who can rerun it. Generally, trials are going to be you have to rerun, but we'll give you waypoint closest to it. Sometimes there's enough people who missed, or the person who ran it themselves didn't click it, and then they might go back into their instance. Or there's an instance crash, and you need to solve Marketplace. Not an instance crash, but a individual player crash. Let's say your trial person for Marketplace crashes, and you say, I'm missing that trial. That's fixable as long as that instance is still up, and it's even fixable if it's not. But if it's still up, you can have that person, I think this was mentioned yesterday, you can have the person who did the Marketplace trial get back into their zone, ask an individual who doesn't have a portal already used to swirl in and put their own portal down on the checkpoint if the instance still exists. If it doesn't, it's just a rerun. But like, there are fixes for this. There's fixes for missing trials. There's fixes for crashes. There's fixes for all of this. One that I want to also communicate on is missing like gems, but you're running. A pet peeve of both SPL and mine is when somebody who's main running takes time to fix something in their build and isn't progressing. If I'm missing Act 2 gems, generally there's going to be one of two situations. Because we're rotating runners, there is going to be an opportunity where you're no longer running and can go fix the things you want to do, you need to fix, and XP. If it's going to be a while, though, let's say you're pushing Act 6 and you're going to go all the way to Beacon and you just got a pair of gloves at the start of Act 6 and you want to get this in and you can't talk to Willie to fix this, either ask, like, saying I need this gem and I can't get it because I'm running. Next person who's going to Act 2 town, can you fix? Or when we get Lily, can somebody buy this for me and drop on next objective? This is a fix that is pretty easily implementable. This is also something that happens in Act 3 for going back to Act 2 for like Desecrate and stuff. If I'm main running to like Lunaris and I know that I'm going to also need to kill Dominus, but I need XP, I might say, hey, next person who's going back to Act 2 for Desecrate, can you also grab me one? I'll drop you an alteration on Dominus. Or on or on Piety in Lunaris. But like, communicating that I'm missing a gem is solvable, but just taking time out of running to go solve it yourself is not a good fix. We have other fixes in place as a leader of the run explicitly for these kinds of things. Crypt Act 2, true, that's also one that's missed and a lot, and like that, getting the waypoint at least is going to be giga huge, so you don't have to run like Fellshrine Ruins and potentially more. So communicating how to fix an item, the big thing that I want the takeaway from this to be is talk about things that are going wrong. Like, there's a tendency, especially for players who are put pretty far behind or are new to a run, to kind of shut up and try and solve things solo. This is a team run. This is a team group run. The expectation is trust your teammates. Trust that your leader and that your teammates are going to be able to solve issues and vocalize what issues are. Things are fixable if the problem is known. How to say no during a group run. This is explicitly to like pushing and some other things. The answer is no, but there is some caveats on when you should say this. Generally, like, this is something that happens when a leader is busy with something else and asks for something that isn't like actually feasible for you. Maybe your build is power troughing and you're asked to go kill Dominus on like a build that has no power for Dominus. Like, your lightning trap and you don't have your lightning spire trap, and you're asked to kill Dominus over somebody who's playing Arma Crema. Saying no is fine. Saying no to the objective is fine, but there should be a good reason for it, especially like if you debrief and ask why. I need a clear, good reason. And sometimes as a leader, I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to say something where it's just like, you don't have XP for it, and like I just like assumed you would, or didn't make a check. I was busy with like not dying to some turbo rare that wants to end my existence. So like, as a leader in a run, there is going to occasionally be a mistake, and as a runner, you need to be able to say no to them and understand that you can say no. But it shouldn't just be I don't want to run this objective, so I'm not going to. It should be there is a good reason. I don't have the build power for it at this specific time. It doesn't make sense for my build to be running this kind of content. I don't have the XP. There should be some good reason. Like, for example, you might look at XP and see that like a Aura bot is like pretty close to highest XP, and ask them to go set up a boss. It is one that a mistake I've made in the past. That Aura bot doesn't have the build power in Act like 6 or 7 to do that boss efficiently. It just doesn't make sense for them to be killing that boss. And so, being able to say no to me, being able to say no as the Aura bot, I would rather farm or like do some main progression in some way that doesn't require any boss killing, where my build is really weak. Is like fine. This one I probably expect some questions on, where it's like, what kind of situations is this good and what is when it isn't, but just remember that you are able to say no, but it should come with the expectation that there is a good reason for it. Generally, this is only for like main and side progression stuff. I guess I did add a slide for it. Bad times to communicate, like I mentioned earlier, right when a runner needs to call for a swirl or update on quest state. With runner being able to talk over when a leader is trying to delegate tasks. And good times is any time that isn't interrupting. And during like any downtime in comms where no objectives or plans are being determined. That's just a recap of what I talked earlier in communication needs. Questions, opportunity 2. Any questions for me on communication? On anything that we covered in the agenda for part 2, I can repost that image from Dern. Here's the agenda again. People want a quick refresher. If I can kill Piety in Act 4 but not Malachi, is that a good time to get someone else to do it for me? No. Generally, we would like one build to be pushing throughout that. It's really kind of a hard trade-off at Piety. It's a bit cleaner than like it's just not feasible once somebody is in Harvest to have somebody swap because of the organs and quest state with that stuff. But generally speaking, any build that can kill Piety in Act 4 should be also able to kill Malachi. It might take a bit longer, but the expectation should be you're able to also kill Malachi. And having a swap there is generally really hard to organize. And it's either probably you shouldn't have been running any of it, or B should be able to do both. Yeah, again, most uniques are pretty not great, and if it's good enough to slot into your build, you should probably know it by name. And if you don't, know it, it's probably not good enough. We did briefly. I don't think I went into enough detail, Sleepy. Maybe. Um. Flat damage crafts are pretty huge. Generally, the priority is everybody should have at least one. Generally speaking, everybody should have both of their 24 crafts, and then we can look at like people who are doing attack based builds and are doing like extra crafts on like amulet rings and belt and whatnot. That's a lower priority than initial craft on like weapon for both casters and for them. Getting weapons sorted is generally going to be 8 transmutes for most builds at 24 or 28. And for the most part, the communication for that should just be how many transmutes you need for crafts. Say, I need 2 transmutes for my crafts, or I need 6 transmutes for my crafts. And people can sort that out on who's dropping and when with that. I believe priority was covered a bit yesterday during SPL. Like weapons, most important than I believe it was amulet, rings, and then belt in that order for other flat crafts. I think if you say 4BR or 4B2R, I'm going to assume you're either talking like I'm not going to understand 4BR probably personally, and 4B2R is going to end up to me as a 6 link. I personally only communicate in the second form that you have with 3B1R or 2B2R. That doesn't mean that your communication is bad, but it needs to be a pre-established thing within your group. You need to, basically with all of this, we're providing what we would do. And if you have something different you would like to do, that's fine as long as the entire group is aware of like what they need to, how they're communicating it, and it's all the same. So if your group all says 4BR, that's fine. I don't like that. I do not feel that's sufficient communication. But if that's how you communicate within your team, that's going to be most efficient for you guys, that's fine. But it needs to be agreed upon, and it needs to be consistent throughout every member of the group. And it needs to be talked about before the run. Yeah. Like, to me, if I wanted to communicate that it's a 4 link, I could say 4 link beforehand instead of saying like 4 and then B2R. Lab Champ, great question. Basically, anytime it delays progression in a meaningful way, it should be communicated. Like, obviously, don't die is a great, like, piece of advice. But if you do die, and it will happen from time to time, I've updating the team on that is pretty crucial. So, like, I died, it's going to be an extra 10, 20 seconds. Examples of this that I can think of is you went into early Act 3 with no res. You didn't get 2 stone rings, and, like, you died to piety while waiting for people to take all of your trial. And you need to re-leap all the way from trial door to piety. Like, communicating that to the team gives them time to do something. They're probably all back in town at this point, but it gives them time to, like, do a full vendor and, like, things like that. It's generally explicitly helpful when it's, like, an active large time sink. I can think of an event, for example, where I was pushing in Duresso's Dream and died in the room where the boss is at the end of the zone, and had to communicate that explicit, like, basically I'm going to have to rerun that entire zone. So yeah, like you said, you died at the end of the first Duresso zone as well. That's, like, either gonna give people a lot more time to farm or, like, can change plans. Basically, I would only communicate it if it's changing people's plans. If it's, like, a minor death in a zone that doesn't matter, I don't care to communicate it. I don't need to communicate that I died. If I, like, die in the boss room of Dominus, for example, I don't care. I just go back to killing them. But if I died in a spot where it's like I'm trying to sync Weaver, like Sleepy said, and somebody's pushing chamber, and I died at this, like, near the boss room for Weaver, but without entering it, and, like, I have to rerun the entire Weaver zone, that kind of information is important so that the chamber 2 player can do other things, or your portal's not ready, or, like, how you sync things up. That's important to communicate. Basically, anytime you'd already be communicating progress, I think is a good time to also communicate any deaths. Hope that answers that. Any other questions? Does anybody have the ability to request to speak? Or any questions that they'd like to ask in chat? I'm building. Sweet. Thank you, Sleepy. That confirmation's huge. Look at that good communication. Holy. All right. I see LabChamp is typing. I'll wait for that. And if there are no other questions, Sweet. I believe, yeah, I created all the items I used in the presentation. I don't think I had any special resources used. Thank you all for coming to the communication lecture. If there's any questions on communication, feel free to post them from this point forward in the help or request feedback channel or our DMs. We'll get around to it as soon as we can. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and hopefully you can apply some of this in your runs today.